Hi, I'm Mimi Chan. Welcome to Culture Chat. Thanks for joining the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today on Culture Chat. I really appreciate your time. I know you are unbelievably busy as commissioner here in Orlando. So you've been in public service for several years, but you were elected...
17, but who's counting?
Who's counting, right. Yeah. But of course you were elected officially as an Orlando City Council Commissioner in 2000. And actually I've met you several times because of your support of our Chinese New Year celebrations. You are always like very enthusiastic and
well, you know, there's always been this intersectionality I have felt between the Asian community and the gay community, because it was kind of interesting how both groups were attracted to that same area in Mills 50. Yes. And way back when I first got elected, the American Planning Association even did a tour, and I went with Fuchs Nipper, who was the Asian Chamber of Commerce president at the time. And we did a tour of we used what we jokingly called Geisha, because the interesting thing was the Asian community supported, and we're not judgmental of the gay community. And so it was kind of like a really good synergy, and everybody got along. And I think it's kind of, a lesson to everyone else in how to get along, because everybody just started working together. And I think great things have happened in Mills 50 as a result. And the interesting thing, when I started going to those cultural celebrations, I would always say, this is wonderful. People love to experience other cultures, the lion dance and all that. So y'all ought to be having a festival of some kind. And we finally, Mills 50, worked together with the chamber and did that amazing first, I can't remember, Dragon Festival, and they've been doing it ever since. Yeah. So I think it's wonderful. Unfortunately, it's no longer. It got so big it outgrew the district. Now we're having it, at Fashion Square. But I love that it started out in the neighborhood.
Yeah, really absolutely. Do. Actually, in 1980, when our Wallum School started here, that was a long time ago as well. Yeah. But that was kind of the point. It was to kind of bring that culture to Orlando, and it was so great as time progressed, because we started out just doing it at individual restaurants and just doing the performances at places that wanted that celebration. And it was so great to see now, finally, that the city is on board, that we have officials that are on board that support us. It means so much to the community.
Well, I've always been on board, and like I say, I unlike a lot of people, I understand that our strength is our diversity, and it's not just a buzzword for me. It's about embracing, it's about celebrating, it's about being there for everyone, because you can learn so much from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like to tease, because my mom always I remember, she doesn't remember names, but she always remembers Commissioner Patty, because she said she's always in the front row cheering, and you're always so enthusiastic, and it's wonderful to see. But so obviously you've done so many wonderful things for the Central Florida area, from neighborhood safety to supporting small businesses. And of course, you're known as the first openly gay elected official in Central Florida. You passed non-discrimination protections and domestic partnership legislation for the LGBTQ community. And I think it's remarkable. And I wondered, though, as a public figure in politics starting out at that time, of course, although we still have a long way to go, I think there's so much more openness and progression now. How difficult was the decision to be open about your sexuality, especially as a woman in politics?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing was that I knew there was no way I was going to do this unless I could be open. And I was really involved with the Rainbow Democratic Club, and I'd moved downtown, and I wasn't very happy with my city commissioner, honestly. And some friends were encouraging me to run for office, and I was thinking about it anyway. And I was really involved with the neighborhood association, and I thought, I'm going to go for this. And I said, but I'm not going to do that unless you guys help me raise some money. And before I even left the room that night, they had my filing fee raised. I'm like, okay, well, y'all are serious. I'll get serious. But we threw that together in 90 days. That first election, and I only lost the runoff I missed the runoff. I came in third. I missed it by like 75 votes or something, which really, it was like so minuscule. I thought, if you're going to lose, never lose badly. And that kind of, got me started. I'm like, wow, what if we threw this together and I almost made it? What if I really, got myself involved and learned more about the issues that people were asking me about? And so the next 4 years, I just plodded along and and got more involved with the neighborhood issues and got to know the other neighborhood presidents. And it didn't hurt that the fellow that was in the job wasn't very, let's say, responsive. No, I think that people think that, some people think that being in public life is like, people lauding you. And I don't feel that way at all. I feel it's service. And people might get angry and upset with you, but that's part of being accessible. If you make yourself accessible, some people are going to like you and some people aren't. But you have to make yourself accessible, I think, and listen to people in order to be effective. So I did it the old-fashioned way. I knocked on 5,000 doors. My friends went with me. And the interesting thing was, more people told me they wouldn't vote for me because I was a woman than that I was gay. And I found that hurtful and disappointing, but I found it fascinating. Although I think a lot of the anti-gay stuff had already started going underground. When I first got elected, there was this whole issue about sidewalks in Audubon Park. And it's kind of like Obamacare, it's not really about sidewalks. Mm-hmm. It was about me being openly gay. And I really think that was what that was about. And so my friends teased me and they said, sidewalks are so horrible, but this is not what the real issue is.
Right,
this was kind of a backlash on me, but we put the sidewalks in for children walking to school, and I'm proud of that because every August and September I used to open the Orlando Sentinel 20 years ago, and you'd hear about another half dozen kids that got hit walking to school on the first day, and we don't have that anymore, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah, it is.
But I think what happened was being out and being courageous gave me the courage to also take on difficult issues. So I think being a gay elected official may be a better elected official because it gave me the courage of my convictions.
Right. I mean, you're definitely a model for all of us. So I think, did you ever feel, other than what you just shared, more discrimination? And like you said, it was more, like you said, as a woman even versus being gay. I mean, what can you have?
Well, I've had a great deal of anti-gay discrimination that has happened to me since I've been elected. I mean, when I was running, that was more against being a woman. Once I got here, I mean, every time we tried to pass any kind of non-discrimination or anything that was just now that would be considered no big deal. Right. I mean, I got some threats. I had people coming in here and praying outside my office. I mean, it was kind of crazy. And when we were voting on the non-discrimination protections, it's really funny. Things are really heightened around here, and I found this strange cooler in my office, and I called the security people. I'm like, oh my God, there's this strange. This is not mine. Where'd this come from? And my police liaison comes running in, and she goes, "It's my lunch." It just kind of shows you how heightened for your own security, that you can be when something like that happens, because people can be it's okay to debate issues. It's not okay to be threatening, and it's not okay to go over that line. And unfortunately, I think in modern politics, we go over that line of civility way too often.
Yes.
I do believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, speaking of that hatred, and we can't, of course, being in Orlando a couple months ago, we marked the 1 year that we remember the horror that happened at the Pulse nightclub.
And that was the hardest thing I have ever had to deal with. I mean, I think there was, whenever you got your faces out in the media a lot, there's always a little bit of backlash. People say, well, why don't you just do your job? And I'm like, there are families and victims that are still hurting, and it was kind of hard for me to get back into. I've got a parking ticket, and this is the worst thing that's ever happened in my life. And you can't tell people, you're lucky that that's the worst thing. You should be dealing with someone who lost their child. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was really hard to kind of get back to that reality for me because it was so overwhelmingly sad. But what I have learned from those families is they're people of faith. They were very forgiving. And they wanted their children remembered. They didn't want an eye for an eye. They wanted their children to remember, and they wanted to celebrate love and decency and honor and all the things that's good in humanity. And we had someone who wanted to destroy our sense of community in Orlando, and instead that horrible shooter ended up bringing us together. But he was not from our community. The thing that made me maddest about all of that coverage was when they kept calling him the Orlando shooter. He was not from here. Mm-hmm. He was not one of ours. And people from Orlando are loving and decent, and there were hand-lettered signs in the neighborhoods that were done by children with rainbows and love. There were religious leaders who had never prayed with the LGBTQ community doing that. There was such an embracing and feeling of unity, and I think that needs to continue, and I'll do everything I can to continue that. And I think that's the great lesson of the heartache, because there will always be a hole in our hearts, but we're going to fill that with love and decency and courage and good.
Yeah, it was very overwhelming. Of course, when we heard about it, it was tragic, and we were all so distraught. And then I saw the lines for people donating blood.
And that was the thing that really freaked me out. When I first heard about it, my first thought as an openly elected official is gay men can't give blood. What if there's nobody to give us blood? So that was one of the first things I put on Facebook, and I started talking about when I was on the street. Nobody tells you how to react to something like this.
Yeah, no, there's no manual.
So that was the first thing I started seeing was blood, because I'm like, oh my God, what if we run out of blood and we can't give blood? And then a reporter came to me on the street and said, have you heard about them relaxing the restrictions on gay men giving blood? And I was so excited. I'm like, wow, really? But then I found out it was just if you haven't had sex within a year and this and that. And I'm like, that really doesn't help a lot. But there were so many people who did, and there were I remember one time I was giving an interview, and this reporter turned, I don't remember who it was, he turned the screen around, he goes, have you seen this? And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? And it was the lines around the blood bank, and the fact that they were running out of supplies just to give blood. And I thought, wow, this is really, really incredible, and this shows that's the kind of story. And that's a story that they told. That was the beautiful thing, was that I think even the reporters and the people who came here were so inspired by our sense of community. We always knew who we were, but I think the world got to know who Orlando is.
Yeah, it was really, really inspiring. So, and it was great because I know that you were kind of always on the forefront of speaking out and helping support those families, and even just to this last memorial.
Well, that was the thing. My purpose in those days was to get media to get help and to get funding to support the families, to make sure that the funding went to the families, which I think that we did a really good job working with Ken Feinberg. He's a wonderful man, and having the One Fund and all the people that worked with that. It was, it didn't happen organically. It kind of, people came here and helped us, and that's what you do. And you have to listen when they say, hey, this is what our experience. We gave the money to not-for-profits, and then it never got to the victims. You want to make sure it gets all to the victims, and it did. And I was really proud that happened here in Orlando. It wasn't like San Bernardino where no money went to the victims. And that money did help them heal. A lot of them couldn't work because they were so distraught because they'd lost their children. A lot of the young people, had lost their jobs because their cars were impounded. People I was on the street. I saw what was happening. And a lot of people didn't know what was happening. And it wasn't just about being on TV. When I was out there on the street for all those hours, I was talking to victims. I was getting people to go to the center to get counseling, because some of them were just shell-shocked, like zombies, some of the survivors, and they didn't know what to do. There were people in the neighborhoods even who were having a hard time, and I sent them to the center. I'm like, everybody's affected or impacted by this in some way or another. But the one thing that I found that I was really kind of concerned about, I'm like, the people in the neighborhoods are going to start complaining about all these road closures. And I'm like, God, I don't want to go back to the office, because I was worried there was going to be these emails. There was not. There was only one. Only one. And that street was closed for a month.
I mean, and those who don't know, who are not from Orlando, it is a major street. It is a major street.
And that was part of what I wanted to do, too, is to explain to people that, this is our downtown. This is just a little bit, this is just a couple of miles from our city hall. I wanted to make sure I was kind of telling that story. And again, there's no manual. I had to really be fast on my feet, but I had been in the club. I knew the owner. I mean, there was a lot of reasons why I was able to give insight that was needed, but like I say, I was delighted with the generosity of this community and around the world. And I was on the street for basically the first 10 days, and then I went right into fundraising. And being wherever I knew they wanted me to go to help raise money for the victims. And I hadn't seen the Eiffel Tower lit up in rainbows or all these, monuments all across the world, the Sydney Opera House. It was beautiful and it was beautiful for someone who's openly gay to see that, because I never thought I'd see something like that in my lifetime. It was sad that it took that to make it happen, but it was beautiful. And this whole year has been sadness and beauty. My friend Deborah Clayton was killed. She was very involved with dragon boats and children, and she was shot. I started feeling a little bit normal, and that happened. And it's just been this roller coaster ride of beauty and horror.
Yeah. I think it's unfortunate that it does take tragedy for people's eyes to get opened and for people's hearts to be opened as well. But at least they are, like you see the support and everything. So that's been sort of positive.
Absolutely. And I think it's unfortunate.
Darkness.
There's still been some level of hatred towards the Muslim community. And I believe hating a Muslim person is the same thing as hating a gay person.
Yeah, absolutely. Discrimination. So, well, in terms of the LGBT community right now, what are some of the major issues that you are kind of still facing, or some of the rights that we are working on for Central Florida, but also nationwide, of course?
We still do not have non-discrimination protection at a statewide level. We have it in our cities, but we don't have it, like if you're in Miami, if you live in Miami, if you live in, not Jacksonville doesn't have it, I don't think. Tampa, so you live in the large cities, Orlando, you're protected, and there's others across Florida, but statewide we don't have protections, and that was one of the things that Equality Florida asked Governor Scott for. Would you at least please do protections in public accommodation, housing, employment? That's like the floor for non-discrimination. That you can rent housing that you're not discriminated against, that you go to a restaurant you're not discriminated against, and if you apply for a job that you're not discriminated against. And it shouldn't be that difficult, because Fortune 500 companies adopted this anyway, but we can't get that in Florida. So that's still something that's so critically important. We do have the right to marry, and that was a Supreme Court case. That's great, but that's not the end all be all for us. We can still be fired from our jobs for who we are, and we still need to get those statewide non-discrimination protections in every single state.
And is there something that we can encourage people in the community to do to help with all of these civil rights?
Absolutely. We're working on something called supplier diversity to encourage people to patronize LGBTQ businesses. Unfortunately, because we've been so busy with Pulse and the response to that, and the assistance center is still open, it's kind of taken a back burner. Again, you have to prioritize, and this took priority over everything for the last year.
And we do have, some support for the community. Of course, we have the Pride Month in June, and then it looks like we have something in Central Florida in October. It's Come Out with Pride.
Come Out with Pride. That's actually become one of the largest events we have in downtown. It's very embraced by our downtown community because the restaurants and everybody's always full. It's a lot of economic development that happens around Come Out with Pride. And there's been a lot of national attention, a lot of national support now with what happened with Pulse, which we're proud of. And, it's a celebration, but it also took on it takes on a more meaning when you have something like Pulse happen in your own backyard, and Pride celebrations across America now, there's usually 49, the 49 victims' names. And that's, like I said, that's the one thing I hear from the families. We don't want them forgot. We don't want our children and our loved ones and our mothers forgotten, and we're doing all we can to make sure that happens. And when we had the event at Lake Eola, we took input from the families. There were all these people that wanted to come perform, and I'm like, we're choosing who the families want, because this is for them. They didn't get to be there when we had the big, candlelight vigil at Lake Eola. They didn't get to experience that, and I think. And we let them have all the seats at the band shell. It was all geared towards them, and they loved it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And for those that don't know, I think a lot of people do watch the news, but it is now an actual memorial. It's not going to be reopened as a club or anything.
No, it's going to. Yeah, and we're working on that. The city was going to buy it, and then there was not city council. Unfortunately, there was not city council support. So, like I say, we're not all there yet. They made it about money. It's never about discrimination. It's always about something else. So Barbara decided to go ahead and go on her own. And I think that was a wise decision, because you don't want to move forward with something when you don't have all in accord in working with it. you don't form a board of directors and half the board of directors doesn't agree with what you're doing. So Barbara formed her own, and I think she's going to be very successful at doing a beautiful tribute.
In terms of your work here in Central Florida, obviously the work you do with the LGBTQ community and all of the other neighborhoods. I mean, 17 years is a long span.
Yeah, I mean, people don't realize I do a lot of work with the kids at Reeves Terrace. I make sure that they have a computer lab, that they've had books. I have a very generous sponsors. We make sure they have school supplies. We're gearing up for that. That's what all that stuff in the corner is over there. We do bicycles for them to ride to school because they were having a truancy problem. We've been doing that for 17 years. Nobody talks about the work I do in the underprivileged community. It's because they only talk about gay. But there's things that I love working on. Dog park, doggy dining. I've gotten to, save Constitution Green. I've gotten to do some really interesting and cool things as a city commissioner. And, some people just come in here a couple hours a week. We're all different, very different people. But I've dedicated my life to this. And if, the job is what you did. It is what you put into it. And I work hard.
Yeah,
and I love what I do.
Yeah, it shows because, anytime we've seen you, you always got that smile on your face and you really just so sincerely look like you're happy to be doing whatever you're doing.
I'm happy, but like I say, there was times when I had to put a smile on my face when my heart was breaking. And I still had to go out there and do my job. And, people think I have it so easy and I don't.
Oh, yeah.
So, I think that's an important lesson. Don't think just because someone is happy, it's because they have it easy. A lot of people have gratitude and happiness just because that's where their heart is. They show gratitude in all things, and those are the happiest people that I know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of strides, and I do want to talk a little bit about the woman power. I see you got Wonder Woman around your office. I'm loving.
Yeah, I love Wonder Woman. She's awesome. Yep, there's Wonder Woman stuff everywhere around here. There's rainbow stuff everywhere.
So I actually, one of my friend, he actually does martial arts with us, and he moved to LA. He actually trained Gal for that role, and that was a previous
really? Oh, how cool!
I thought you would enjoy that.
I haven't seen, the guys are taking me probably on Sunday. I have not seen Wonder Woman. Can you believe it? I haven't seen Wonder Woman yet.
How busy you are.
I'm so busy. I really have. I have not had time to see. I know. I have to go. Yep.
Yes. But I see we're pretty much sitting here surrounded by just culture and color and love. This is amazing.
Yeah, I kind of call it my crazy cat lady office, but there is a little bit of something everywhere. And there's everything from urban chickens to community gardens to, something from Harvey Milk, his nephew Stuart, which is one of my prized possessions. There's just some, I've been here a long time, but I've also tried to make sure that I don't just sit here. I said, I'm not here to warm a chair. I'm here to get things accomplished. Mm-hmm. And I was exactly where I needed to be, June, a year ago. Mm-hmm. I was, you never know what unique challenge you're going to really, what your unique challenge in your life is going to be. I hope that's the hardest thing I ever have to do.
So looking ahead, what new things are we challenged with?
People are like, okay, what's next? And I'm like, I love local government. I don't have any aspirations to go to Washington or anything like that. And I never have. I believe in bloom where you're planted. I'm not a person who has tremendous, desire to be president or government. I don't. I love talking to people, helping them solve their problems. And, people have been gracious enough to allow me to rehire me I have to ask people to rehire me every 4 years. It's not automatic. And I take that very seriously. Mm-hmm. So as we move forward, I want to work, of course, on some more art projects and things like that. I love working with the main streets. We've got some wonderful things coming for downtown South, the Sodo area. Some planning and some work with the hospital I think is going to be pretty cool. It's, I've really kind of been so focused that I got to get it back into planning now. It was crisis for so long, and now we're easing back into, okay, what is next? But But I always have something in the works.
Yeah, well, we definitely
an anti-graffiti. I really want to get an anti-graffiti program going because I want art. I don't want people scrawling their initials and defacing things. And
is that a kind of a growing problem here?
Very much so. So that's probably going to be the next thing I really throw myself into is stopping the tagging. It causes tens of thousands of dollars in damage all over Orlando, and mainly to small businesses who cannot afford it. So again, it's not very big, it's not very sexy, but it's important to people who, have businesses in downtown Orlando.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
So a couple questions I usually round out with on my podcast. This is a cultural podcast, and we like to talk about traditions, and everyone has different traditions, and it means something different to them. What comes to mind when you hear the word tradition?
Well, I think that a lot of gay people are attracted to historic neighborhoods because we kind of don't have our own traditions because we've had to deny who we were. So I love historic neighborhoods. I'm a Christmas freak. I'm a Grinch. The Grinch is like I love the Grinch. There's like these things from my childhood and things that just are meaning Wonder Woman. For me, it's those kinds of things. My family is, we're tight, we're Italians. You never move more than 10 miles away from each other.
A lot of food and fun.
A lot of food, exactly. And I'm actually going to Italy for the first time in my life this December, so I'm very excited about that.
Lovely, yeah. Italy's amazing. The food is amazing.
And I can't wait to see where we're going to central Italy, very close to where my great-grandparents came from.
Wonderful. And for your family, because a lot of families and a lot of people that are on the outskirts of who you are, like having to deal with the politics and you being in the limelight, has it been a toll for them? Have they always been supportive of you? Have you ever had to deal with anything like on an internal basis of struggle, or has everyone always been supportive?
It's been a struggle. Some of my family members, aren't as supportive of my lifestyle as others, but I'm lucky most of them are. And I'll just leave it at that. I have my own internal struggles like other people, It's not all happy all the time, but I think, like I say, it's important to take those struggles and to try to help others. I'm very involved with the Zebra Coalition because I know what it's like to be a kid who wasn't accepted.
Right. Yeah, that was actually my next question, was what advice you did have for someone maybe listening that isn't sure that they can be who they are.
It gets better because it was horrible for me when I was coming out. I was bullied as a kid. I wasn't accepted as a young person. I was suicidal. I was different. I was miserable. And it was really cathartic for me to do. It gets better when people are talking about teen suicide and all that, because I was one of those kids. And I think it's important for people to realize that it does get better. And, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And even though I felt so hopeless at that point in time in my life, you got hormones going, it's hard, you don't know quite who you are yet. And I'm passionate about helping LGBTQ youth because they have it even worse than other young kids.
Yeah, of course, there's so much going on. I feel that that what you just shared is probably a big reason why, like what you said in the beginning of the interview, was I would not have moved forward in politics or limelight without being who you are, because you've had to overcome so much.
Struggle does make you, they say it's like, they throw you into a river, and the friction of the river is what polishes the rocks and makes them beautiful. And we all have our struggles.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a fun question, you have like a couple books or movies or things you like to recommend?
Well, I just read Pope Francis's book on the environment, which was interesting. It's called Praise Be, which is not at all what it's about. But I just finished Pope Francis's book on the environment. He's a lovely Pope. Yes. I think Pope people would be kind of surprised that I would be reading that, but it was a gift from someone. I want to see Wonder Woman. I haven't seen it yet.
That is on your to-do list. I'm going to talk to your assissant after this and say, all right,
well, he's the one supposed to take me. He's the one that's actually taking me. Absolutely. Bill's a good friend too. I do read a lot, and I do try to see enjoy other cultures, and now that I paid my house off, I'm going to be going to see other places. And I think it's always important to be interested, and always never be afraid to learn something new.
Commissioner Sheehan, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to Culture Chat and hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please subscribe and rate my podcast. Feel free to leave me suggestions or send an email to mimi@culturechatpodcast.com or follow me on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.